They say history is written by the victors, but sometimes it feels more like history was written by someone who honestly couldn't care less.
Excuse me, when did the Mongols rule China?
I don't know, I just work here.
American history in particular tends to take on a life of its own over time, leading to plenty of seemingly straightforward facts in our history books that were either taken way out of context or are, let's face it, just plain wrong. Ben Franklin's turkey. You know the story about Benjamin Franklin fighting to make the turkey the national bird of the United States?
The turkey, a creature so amazingly stupid, it'll stare up at a rainstorm with its mouth wide open until it actually drowns.
Hey, what's everybody looking at?
Look, nobody can deny that turkeys are an important part of American culture. Sort of. But that story about Benjamin Franklin? Not so much. Franklin did question putting a bald eagle on the Great Seal of the United States in a letter to his daughter. But here's the thing, the whole turkey bit was kind of a joke. First, he calls the bald eagle a bird of bad moral character, who lazily steals food from other birds. Granted, they are kind of rude. But after that, Franklin writes this about the turkey. He is besides, though a little vain and silly, a bird of courage, and would not hesitate to attack a grenadier of the British Guards who should presume to invade his farmyard with a red coat on. Courageous battle turkeys? Yeah, it's pretty obvious that Franklin is just kidding around in this letter, showing a bit of that old Franklin wit that made him so famous. And even in the joke, he never explicitly states that the turkey should replace the bald eagle. He's just saying, an eagle? Come on, George, might as well make it a turkey. Besides, have you ever heard a bald eagle? It's not even trying. Revolutionary tactics. Everyone knows that the colonists in the American Revolution came out on top because they used hit-and-run guerrilla-style tactics that they learned from the Native Americans. Also because they had Mel Gibson. Only, that's not how it happened. Prior to the American Revolution, colonists actually requested help from Britain because they had no freaking clue how to fight against Native American tribes. So if the British couldn't fight back, it's not because the Minutemen were too wild and crazy, it's simply because the Brits taught them to fight too well. In the end, the real reason Great Britain gave up the fight was, basically, because they were broke. Talk about anticlimactic. It's not nearly as awesome as Mel Gibson stabbing an evil British horse with an American flag. Now, while we're on the subject of bogus facts about the American Revolution, the Siege of Yorktown. We learned in history class that the nascent United States won the Revolutionary War after American and French forces defeated the British at Yorktown on October 19, 1781. After that, the war was over, right? The British forces tucked tail and fled across the Atlantic, while the colonists probably deep-fried a turkey and listened to the Red Hot Chili Peppers. A classic American celebration.
America, 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 yeah!
But before you start lighting off those fireworks, you should know that Yorktown was hardly the final battle of the war. The last skirmish was actually the naval battle of Cuddalore in the Bay of Bengal, off the coast of India, on June 20th, 1783. That's right, the final battle of the American Revolution took place in India, 18 months after the whole thing was supposed to end. How is that even possible? Well, remember, France sided with the United States in 1778. At that point, France was also at war with Great Britain by default, only they didn't need to cross the ocean to get their fight on. America's first war took place on a global scale, and the country ain't stopped since.
Well, police, get down on the ground!
World War II landfall. Most of us assume that World War II never reached the United States mainland. Sure, we all know about Pearl Harbor, and some of us are even familiar with the Battle of the Aleutian Islands that happened in Alaska. But neither Alaska or Hawaii are part of the mainland, and besides, they weren't even states at the time, so they don't count. Sorry, Bam. But what many may not know is that the Japanese did attack the US mainland several times during the war. A Japanese submarine shelled the Elwood oil field near Santa Barbara, California on February 23, 1942. A few months later, on June 24, 1942, another Japanese sub opened fire on Fort Stevens in Oregon. In September 1942, on 2 occasions, the same submarine used a float plane to drop incendiary bombs near Brookings, Oregon, in hopes of starting a forest fire. None of these attacks caused major damage, but it's a little terrifying to think that the Japanese Navy was the greatest threat to our West Coast until Carrot Top started doing stand-up. Burning witches. The Salem Witch Trials, which lasted from February 1692 to May 1693, represent one of the most prominent examples of mass hysteria in American history.
Well, that's 75 witches we've processed. That ought to show God whose side we're on, eh, Pastor?
Yes, Nedwin, but we have many more strumpets to incinerate.
During this period, hundreds of people in Salem Village, Massachusetts were accused of witchcraft, and about 20 people were executed. You probably know that the puritanical government burned these accused witches at the stake, except that's a total myth. Accused witches were occasionally burned at the stake in medieval Europe.
What makes you think she's a witch?
Well, she turned me into a newt.
A newt?
We got better.
But in Salem, almost all the so-called witches were hung. So that's not exactly better. Wouldn't a slap on the wrist have been enough? Maybe banish them to a nice swamp?
Get out of my swamp, you kids!
See? Much nicer. Capital crisis. Most people know that Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States, but what they might not know is that D.C. isn't our first capital city. It's not even close. It's actually our 9th capital. The first capital was Philadelphia, where the Continental Congress convened in 1774 and signed the Declaration of Independence 2 years later. The capital changed several times during the Revolutionary War, from Philadelphia to Baltimore to the unlikely Lancaster, Pennsylvania, as Congress constantly moved to keep one step ahead of the British Army. When George Washington took the oath of office in 1789, he did it in New York City, meaning Federal Hall in the Big Apple briefly served as the first capital of the United States under the U.S. Constitution. That lasted about a year before Philadelphia became capital again, and things finally settled in the District of Columbia in July 1790. Thankfully, it's been smooth sailing in Washington since then. Thanks for watching. Click the grunge icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.